I kind of classify my strength training as I make people stronger, faster, and harder to kill. And that can be broken down to a simpler form of is I want all my athletes, no matter what their sport of choice is, I want them to be fit enough that the answer is always yes. Hey man, can you help me build a deck on the back of my house this weekend? Yes. Hey, you want to jump in on this charity 10K next weekend? Yes. Hey, we're all thinking about doing a work team at the Spartan race. Got any interest? Yes. I don't want any of my athletes thinking I don't have the strength or the dexterity or the stamina or the proprioception or balance to be able to do X, Y, or Z. I want them to be able to say yes. Even if their primary thing is to cycle, they should be able to go and rock climb. They should be able to do a Spartan race. They should be stronger, faster, and harder to kill.
That is Coach Wes this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hey everybody, how's it going? How's the family? How's the training? How's the weather out by you? It's starting to get a little cold here on the East Coast, and it's starting to get dark a little bit earlier, but for those of you who do follow me on Instagram and Facebook and elsewhere, you will know that I've been out of the training game for over a month now. And this all started, about a month ago. I had a saddle sore, and it just wasn't getting any better. So I was like, maybe I should take a little bit of time off. So I took some time off, and that didn't help. So I did the adult grown-up thing, went to the doctor, got the antibiotics, and, so that was it. I was not training while on the antibiotics, and that was under the recommendation of a physician, and that is because the antibiotics that I was taking, it's not proven, but it has been linked to Achilles tendon rupture. And that was something that I just did not need to go through. So as I am recording this right now, today was my first day back, and I got in the pool. My shoulders have never been so sore in my life. And swimming 2,300 yards, I don't think has ever really quite felt that hard. But it feels great to be back, and it feels great to be back again this week with another amazing podcast guest. My guest today is Coach Wes, otherwise known as Wes No Limits Hammer Harder on Instagram. And I discovered Wes because one of my followers actually sent me his name, and they said, listen, you have got to get this guy on the podcast. He is a strength coach. He is a triathlon coach, and he's just a really, really cool dude. You got to get him on. So I reached out to Wes, and it turns out that his gym that he was opening, self-made training facility out in Columbus, Ohio, was delayed a little bit because of some things that we get into in the podcast. But he asked me to hold off for, a couple weeks just so that he could get things settled. And then he wanted to reconnect so that we could record this podcast. And I'm super glad that we did, because Wes is one of those people where we just got to talk and quite literally lost track of the amount of time. And, I apologized multiple times before, during, and after for taking up so much of Wes's time. But he divulged to me that he actually did not set aside an amount of time. He wanted to just jump on Skype and have a conversation and, let that conversation go wherever it was to go. And he didn't want to put any time restrictions on it. So I really appreciate that. And you could tell in the interview that, he was just very open and wanted to chat, and I absolutely loved it. So it was a really, really awesome conversation, and it really just winds all over the place throughout Wes's journey, from being in the restaurant industry to the tattoo industry to the coaching and the gym and, just everything that he has gotten into, and how he just puts 100% effort, 110% effort into everything that he's done. So I want to just let this one go and let you guys enjoy Wes's story. And I really, really hope that you dig this one as much as I did, because this was a really fun interview for me. Oh, man. All right. So, Wes, thank you so much for doing this, man. Like I said before we started, I know that you have probably just tons on your plate right now, especially with, the opening of the gym and everything. But I'm definitely pumped to get connected and talk with you this evening about your very wide ranging journey. All the way from doing tattoos and owning a tattoo shop, and then, starting coaching, and now just most recently opening up your own gym with this facility that just looks like it's state of the art from some of the pictures and videos that I've seen. So, thank you so much for carving out some time to sit down and chat with me.
Oh, my pleasure. I was super stoked when I got the invite. I was like, let's do it, man.
Yeah,
This is the fun stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I have a blast doing this, and, it's super easy for me to stay up late and grind out a podcast, but sometimes it's a little bit harder to get some other stuff done. You know what I mean?
I totally get it.
It's amazing what you can do when you're having fun and enjoying what you're doing. So, and I'm sure that, you would say the same exact thing for, when you're training clients at 5 a.m. before they have to go to work.
100%, man. 100%. They're the ones that dictate the hours. So I just show up with a smiling face.
Yeah. Well, and I guess sometimes it was probably pretty easy when you were training those clients right in your garage, right?
Yeah, those were the good old days. Though with me opening the gym, I'm opening the gym actually on the other side of town, because we went with the whole location thing. So I'm actually going to still keep, the irony is I'm opening this 8,000 square foot, just killer gym. And most of the clients I train as far as personal training will actually still be trained in my garage.
Yeah. So I actually had a guy on who also opened up, his own gym in Westchester, which is not far from us. Here in PA, and he had the kind of the same situation where he had some clients that he was training in their homes, and then he opened up a gym, and they were like, no offense, Devin, like I really like you a lot, but I'm not going to come to your gym when you come to my house.
Right, exactly.
So that's great. So the gym has the gym fully opened yet, or is that are you going to have like a massive grand opening?
So we loosely opened 2 weeks ago. Hardened that open this week, and we're just about fully buttoned up. We still got a little bit of our AV and big screen TVs to tweak up, and then today we just got our heavy bags and Muay Thai bags. So once the AV system is up and running and I have no more contractors coming in and out, we'll consider ourselves legitimately open, which should be in the next couple days. And then just with the way the season is and the business model, which is we don't have members, we just do personal training. We want to give our team a chance to get acclimated and form the bond amongst each other and get their clients all up and running. And then that way, instead of it's just our business promoting a grand opening, it's our entire crew of trainers too. So we're shooting for like the big grand opening around January 15th.
Okay. And so I'm sure you're not one for New Year's resolutions, because you are probably more along the lines of, doing this for life, but you will be opening right around that time.
Yep, exactly.
And I'm sure it wasn't timed that way on purpose, but it just kind of happenstance.
Yep, we were supposed to open September 1st, and just with permits and typhoon in China delayed half of our equipment by 3 weeks. Then it got stopped in customs and stuck there for a week. That we ended up basically having a loose opening on the 15th, and we'll call it, November 1st is when we're officially soft opened.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, slightly off schedule.
yeah, absolutely. But I mean, this isn't your first go at opening a business. You have actually owned a business in the past, but it was, let's say, slightly different than what you were doing right now. You owned a tattoo shop, or
Yep.
do you still own it? Are you still part of that?
Yeah, I brought in a managing partner because there's a middle business. That's the segue to the coaching. In 2011, I opened up kind of a triathlon store. It was more like a deluxe bike fitting studio, and we had a mechanic, and we did fitness classes and bike fitting, and that's kind of where the coaching blossomed. But yeah, so when I did that, I brought in a managing partner. And then, because I know this is the whole doing it for yourself theme. And I know we had kind of talked previously, like lessons learned, things that transfer from one business to another. That partnership went south in the middle of a bunch of melee. So I now have a second managing partner who's actually a guy who I apprenticed years ago. And then he tattooed for me for 5 years. Then he went to another shop to just get a new variety for a couple of years. But then he was actually in Philadelphia, kind of in your neck of the woods.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
For 8 years. And then moved back and bought an existing tattoo shop. I went to go see him, saw the way he was operating and running his crew, and took pride in his shop, and was like, this looks like a familiar way to run a business. I think I might have done it exactly like this. So I was like, cool. I know he's on board. So we sat down. I said, listen, man, this other guy wants out. I need somebody to fill his place. Obviously, you and I are running businesses very similar. Let's say we team up. So we did that 4 years ago, and it's been picture perfect since.
And how did you get into that whole space? Like, were you always an artist? Were you one of those kids that was, constantly drawing on the outside of his notebook all through, like middle school and high school?
Yep. So my grandfather was an artist and a sign painter. My aunt is an artist and ended up going into marketing and advertising. And I definitely was on the creative end during grade school and high school. I actually went to culinary school and worked in the restaurant business for like 5 years, and learned a lot about actual business. Ended up working for a company and helped them open up a few restaurants. And then 2 guys took an offshoot from that company and opened up their own, like super uber fine dining, like just this upper level thing that you might find in like a classy area in Europe or out in California, and help them open it. And as good of general manager and chef as they were probably the 2 worst business owners now, looking back, that I could have ever worked for, which was fantastic because I'd seen a lot of success with the company that I was opening restaurants for, but it was nice to see a bunch of failures actually happen. And then just got burned out and got lucky and got an apprenticeship with tattooing, and then opened up a shop and took a lot of the positives I learned from the restaurant industry and transferred them over, and tried to not make the same mistakes, at least that I saw with that kind of private boutique restaurant open.
Now, were they mistakes that you could see right as they were going on, or is it something that you could see like, hindsight is 2020?
There was definitely like hindsight is 2020, but one thing I definitely realized is I don't know if it was necessarily arrogance or ignorance, but it was a mix of both. But I think one of the things is these two were so competent as general manager and chef that and we've seen this, I mean, what do they say? 1 out of every 10 restaurants succeeds. So it happens probably for this reason 9 out of 10 times, is that you're so competent in such a hard craft. Being a general manager is super, super difficult. Your multitasking abilities and social skills have to be just on point 24/7. Being a chef, you have that creativeness. It's like this mad genius type of thing, and there's just a fuck ton of stress. But just because you can be super competent at a very high, difficult situation doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good business person. And so I think they just took for granted that they knew business. So, just not negotiating bank, loans and lines of credit correctly, setting up, accounts with purveyors to, I think also the big thing was managing the money. Like for the first, I think 6 months, there was no accountant. I think they thought they could do it themselves. And then the ever popular restaurant problem of alcohol and drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just saw it starting to like blow up. Like the stress leads to more drinking. There's a bar at restaurants, and who's going to question the owner of having a cocktail at 8 a.m? But
Yeah.
you just start to see this stuff unfold, and it's, they're super stressed. They're not, prepared. Let's have a drink. Drink leads to smoke. Smoke leads to snort, whatever the situation is. And next thing you know, we've got two guys that are highly stressed and half coherent most of the day. And it made it about 4 years.
Yeah. I could definitely see how being in that environment, one, would be stressful for you, especially as the manager who's trying to get information and trying to get things done. But then just on top of that, it's just like, it's almost like, they're there, but they're not there.
Yeah.
And so, you're trying to get shit done, and it almost seems like these two are just off like dicking around. And you're like, well, wait a minute, you guys are like doing this, but I could see how that would be extremely, extremely stressful. Extremely.
Yeah, it gets crazy. I mean, and things like that you don't see on TV, like the level of the restaurant industry is incredibly stressful. Like 40-hour work weeks don't exist.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a chef or a sous chef or a manager or a general manager, because now you're on salary. It's standard work week is 65 hours. Busy season through the holidays, kind of depends on the restaurant, but you could easily be working 82. I mean, there were times where I was clocking in 110 hours. For the week, you're on your feet. The kitchen's 115 degrees. And then, you add for these guys, things start slipping through the crack and they're like, oh shit, we got a $2.5 million restaurant. We can't pay, our fish purveyor or our dry goods purveyor or X, Y, and Z because we're not hitting the sales or managing our money or hitting tight enough margins. And it's classic. There is a bar in a restaurant.
Yeah.
You don't hit the medicine cabinet and grab 2 ibuprofen when there's every high-end booze 10 feet away from you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then so it's not like it's the only story that's ever played out like that. I just happen to witness it firsthand.
Yeah. So where did this idea of tattooing come in?
I always dug tattoos. And people think I'm lying about this, but it's absolutely true. So my grandfather, my dad's dad, and I, who was the artist, for whatever reason, we had this super tight bond. And so he was just blue collar worker, Cleveland, World War II, came out, became a sign painter, modest lower middle class living. And so growing up, he was, pretty much semi-retired. And so every afternoon, his ritual was to go, downtown Maple Heights. So, 10 blocks away, 5 blocks away. And he'd have a beer and a whiskey, a Boilermaker, and sit there, and there'd be a bunch of other World War II dudes, and it was a shotgun bar. and they just shoot the shit for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then you come home. Just kind of, a midday social. So whenever I'd be staying over there, we called it the drinking store, and we had our song going to the drinking store. We'd sing in the car, go to the drinking store. I'd get a bag of chips and a Coca-Cola. He'd have his Boilermaker. There was like a pinball machine. I'd sit there hanging out with all the old guys. And so I'd see the World War II, like the faded tattoos. And I'm telling you, for whatever reason, I thought they were the coolest thing on the fucking planet. Like, they were so faded too. Like, you don't even know what they are. But I was just like, all I know is when I'm as old as this dude, I want a big purple blob that I can tell people used to be a Black Panther.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with it. So I knew I was getting tattooed when I was 6 years old.
So you knew that you were going to get tattooed, but
Yep.
you didn't know that you were also going to be doing the tattoos.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm getting burned out in the kitchens. Have been getting tattooed, love Tattoo Magazine, just dig tattoos. So I start pounding the pavement, trying to get an apprenticeship. Pardon me. And I end up meeting this guy, Kevin Lee, Tattoos by Kevin, Body Stain Productions. And so he would, like most artists, he had a unique personality. So I'm in there, basically trying to convince him to give me an apprenticeship. And so what he doesn't do, though, like everybody else had at this point, was he didn't say no. He didn't tell me to leave. He was just vague, kind of like, type of thing. So I was like, and from reading the books, I heard, you got to pay your dues. And I had been used to that in the kitchens. And I had, said, hey, I'll hang out and clean whatever. And he kind of just shrugged his shoulders like, It's like, all right, well, that's not a fucking no.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
So I was like, all right, cool. So that next Wednesday, I showed up at noon. I think he thought I was a customer. Like, if I recall, like, he didn't know who I was. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm Wes. I'm here to, actually, back then I was going by my real first name, Dan, like, here to start my apprenticeship. What needs cleaned? And he just hands me like Windex, and I'm cleaning mirrors and vacuuming, and dude doesn't really talk to me all day long. And the other tattoo artist comes in midday, and he was semi-friendly. And so I was like, again, he didn't tell me no. So, and I'm used to, again, in the kitchens, completely in a non-politically correct environment, at least back in the day. Tons of ball busting and hazing. So, being ignored is nothing.
Right.
I'm like, all right, I can play this game. Show up on whatever my second day off was. Again, clean, sit there, do nothing, and plugged away for like a month. And then finally he starts talking to me and have an interest in me. And then, we're going out to lunch and blah, blah, blah. And then I get some equipment, and I'm starting to practice. And so he had not said anything about me tattooing at this point. Maybe I'm 4 or 5 months into my apprenticeship. And we're getting into busy season, and I come in and there's all this wood and drywall, and he's like, Danny, get over here, help me. And so we're building it. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, we're building a station for the new tattooer. And I was fucking devastated. I was like, fuck. I'm like, all right, I'm not getting my shot yet. So I'm helping him build it, and I'm like, he's not saying anything. I'm like, so who's the new tattooer? Where is he coming from? And he looks at me just deadpan. He says something like, are you a fucking idiot? It's you. I'm like, well, you didn't say you were building my tattoo station. You said the new tattooer. And he kind of just smirked. And so we built my tattoo station, and then it started.
And so for the uneducated, me included, all told, one, how long does like an apprenticeship last? And I don't even know. So maybe there is no set, like, okay, you are an apprentice for, 2 years and then they cut you loose. And while you are an apprentice, who or what are you tattooing on? Because I know they sell like this fake skin and like fake body parts that you can tattoo on. But like, do you actually tattoo on people? Like, do you tattoo the other tattoo artists in the shop? Like, how does that all work?
So, a tattoo apprenticeship is as long as it takes until you're ready, which is, I know, a very odd answer. But some people, I would say, I've had tattooers get adequate enough that under strict, moderating of what design they're going to do and on what body part they're going to do can start tattooing well on a limited capacity in about 6 months.
Okay.
I've also had people, just the learning curve's a little bit longer, that I've seen people take about 2.5 years. But just because it took them that much longer to actually get the grasp doesn't mean they're not going to be as good, if not better. There's this level of craftsmanship, and sometimes it's just kind of how much, eye-hand coordination, how much time you get to dedicate to it. Are you just an apprentice, or are you the apprentice who's also working the front desk and the manager? So technically you're working 40 other hours. It kind of just depends. Also depends on the teacher. Kevin, and granted, no disrespect whatsoever, this is the guy who gave me my chance and loved the dude to death, but horrible teacher. My apprenticeship just sucked bad. And I was a bad tattooer for a couple years to come afterwards as well. But as far as practicing, it starts, hopefully you're being, you're taught well, but at some point you got to do a tattoo. First tattoo is usually on yourself on the inside of the calf, opposite of your dominant hand. So most tattooers, the inside of their left leg looks like garbage because that's where they practiced. Pig's feet are always a good one to do. Not completely the same as skin, but pretty decent. Like it's a good place to actually start before you even tattoo yourself. And then it's friends. And lots of times those friends are the dudes at the tattoo studio, everybody, and when you're half or 2/3 covered in tattoos, the small, quarter size crappy rows really fucking matter. Like we all got them. We all have apprentice tattoos. It's kind of just the dues paid because somebody gave us skin.
Yeah.
So, but the point is, under a good apprenticeship, it's going to be manageable tattoos as far as size and complexity and locations on the skin where the skin's already taut. So, like the side of a calf or an ankle as opposed to on a stomach is much more difficult to tattoo. So we kind of set them up, or at least you should be set up for some version of success, and that the damage is minimal at best.
And so my last question, kind of like in this, portion of your story, is like you said for a few years that you were a bad tattoo artist. Did you then move on from this shop where you were working to another shop where you learned more?
No. So actually, so the shop I was at, again, I love Kevin, but he lived a very rock and roll lifestyle. And mixed with the fact that, and my shop included now even, typically this was before you could make enough money to have in the upper rent districts. So they were usually in bad neighborhoods where the rent is cheap. So his studio was in a particularly bad neighborhood, and paired with his rock and roll lifestyle, it became a bit much. So, and no other tattoo shop was hiring. So I was like, right, I'm opening up my own tattoo shop. I got no choice. So I had 2 credit cards and I maxed them out and opened up a tattoo shop.
Okay. So you went from basically apprentice to tattooing, on your own for a little while. And then it's like, oh, I'm opening my own shop. Like, this is just how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Opened up my own tattoo shop. Like I said, I maxed out 2 credit cards. Within a month, emptied my savings account. So my brother actually was a chef in Columbus at the time. And so I called him up and I was like, dude, I can do the work of 3 people. I was like, give me a premium wage. I'll prep cook Sunday mornings and Monday mornings. And I'll work the hotline Sunday night, Monday night. And then I was prepping Tuesday mornings as well. I was like, just give me a good wage. I'll be able to outwork anybody threefold. And so I did that for 6 months, and then would go to the tattoo shop Tuesday night, then work all day Wednesday, all day Thursday, all day Friday, all day Saturday. And then eventually I got better. I also got better at business. Word of mouth started to happen, and I was able to then officially quit the restaurant industry and tattoo full time.
And so this now, this is where like the fitness thing kind of comes into place, because after you had this shop for a little while, this is where you said you had started this kind of more or less, seems like it was more focused on bike fitting and kind of, like a boutique style that way versus like a triathlon specific store. But where did that business partner, come from?
So, fast forward now, I've been tattooing for, 11 years. It's 2008. So, and I know you had mentioned you were talking about, fitness and tattooing. You don't usually see combined. And
Yeah.
I would say for the people who you've not obviously 100%, but it's kind of a common story that the people in the tattoo industry that you find who are into fitness have pretty much the same journey that I did or story. And it's because of the occupation. So it looks like a really easy job. But what people don't understand is any of the tattooers that take themselves seriously, which, I mean, now there's so many of them, the hours these guys are putting in, drawing, painting, learning how to use the iPad technology for rendering T-shirts. Some of these guys have the side businesses with their artwork. I mean, these guys are working 80, 90 hours a week.
Yeah.
So A, they're working a shit ton. B, even if they're just tattooing, I mean, you're researching designs. I mean, when you go and book that koi sleeve, that guy's not, drawing that in an hour and a half. You're getting rendition of number 8. So there's, it's like, oh my God, my tattooer charges, $200 an hour. It's like, well, if he actually charged you $200 an hour, you wouldn't be able to afford it.
Yeah.
He's not charging you for all the hours it took to draw. He's charging $200 an hour for the tattooing. So kind of my point is this: these guys work these long hours, oftentimes 6-7 days a week, and most of it is sitting down. And so just like any other job, you're busy, pressure, limited on time. So you're eating fast food when you can, and you tend to get a little overweight. And mine was, I'm home from a vacation in Florida, 2008, flipping through the pictures. And I'm like, who's the big fat guy making his moves in on my wife? I'm like, oh, that's me. And at that point I was 210, soft 210.
Mm-hmm.
Like I bet over 30% body fat.
Okay. And how tall are you?
6 foot.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, still.
Soft.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Soft.
Mm-hmm.
So I just went online and picked up, typed in whatever, couch to 5K.
Okay.
And I didn't know how long they would be. So whatever, I think it was 12 weeks. So then I Googled 5Ks on that date, which happened to be like October 30th or something like that. Because I did a Halloween pumpkin run. And so I don't know what day one on the couch to 5K. Oh, actually, no. If I had to bet, it probably happened before I picked up the couch to 5K. So I decided I was going to run. And so my block happened to be a perfect kilometer. And so I headed out and I probably ran a quarter of a kilometer before I was gassed. And then just walked the rest. Picked up the couch to 5K and then started working through it and did that 5K. Super slow, but it was like one of the biggest runner highs or just achievement highs I've ever had. By then, I think maybe I'd probably lost like 20 or 25 pounds. And so I was bit by the endurance bug at that point. Like, felt way better, looked way better, confidence was up, banged out my 32 or 33 minute 5K and just thought I was lightning fast. And, you would have thought I qualified for Boston. I was so stoked.
Yeah, but I mean, if you, even looking back now and you think about it, like over the course of that 12 weeks, like it probably did feel like you qualified for Boston. Like you you went from, probably doing pretty close to nothing. I mean, they don't call it couch to 5K,
Right.
for no reason. Like,
Yep.
you were going from basically nothing to completing this 5K. And I mean, for your first 5K time of like, in the mid to low 30s, like that's still pretty respectable, like especially for somebody who was not a runner.
Yeah, and so it's cool too because I mean, honestly, even crossing Ironmans, I've done Ram and some other big events. I honestly have never felt as good at a finish line. Might be tied with my first triathlon as that first 5K. So whenever I'm coaching people, I don't have to like look hard. Like I just reflect on that because lots of times people, just because I've been in the game for a while, and kind of my persona, sometimes people get mistaken that maybe I only take like elite athletes or like that upper 25% when that's the furthest from the truth. The bulk of my clients are right in the sweet spot of, mid packers, and some of my absolute favorite clients are the people that were taken from couch to 5K because I get to be part of what I know is going to be the end result, which for me is like it's never been beat yet.
Yeah.
So I get super pumped knowing that somebody's going to make that huge leap from, couch potato to some version of confident and healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And guess what? There is nothing more rewarding than getting an email from an athlete that says like, hey, listen, I just wanted to let you know, like, obviously, I can see my times getting better. I can see my power going up or this or that. But just so you know, I feel way better than I've ever felt. And I did this run, or I did such and such, or I did this. And just so you know, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, I would have done that and I would have been dead for the rest of the day. But then I just did it, this past weekend, and I went and played with my kids after, and we went to the pumpkin patch, or we went apple picking, or we did this, or we did that. And I didn't even feel tired. Like I still felt strong when I was finishing. Like there's not a single thing in the world better than reading that email.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Like I get pumped on race day because I know later in the day the text messages that are going to come. I tell people this all the time. Like I like the people think coaching is a very giving job, and it is, but it's also on the other end, I'll admit, it's one of the most selfish jobs. Like I live for exactly what you're saying. Those emails and those texts, like I get jacked up on that. To the point of, so my wife is actually an elite Ironman triathlete, very, very close to qualifying for Kona. And she has a super busy job as a scientist, and she started as a triathlon coach like 4 years ago. And she only handles a couple of them. And so like the second year, she picked up a couple more than she could handle. And she was getting super stressed out. And so I was like, man, like you're really, between your training and your job and then the coaching of the 5 athletes, as thorough as you do it, like, is it worth it? Because you seem so stressed. And she made a point of saying, like, don't take for granted your job as a coach. She's like, you get that positive feedback every day. She's like, I don't get that at my day job, that I need to help people. And I also then need that reciprocation of them saying thank you and letting me know you helped me. She's like, I need to know I'm contributing. And I thought that was pretty, like, that was a like super honest answer, like, coaches, don't take your job for granted. Like we get this great feedback, and people don't always get that pat on the back like we do from our clients on a daily basis. Some people don't get that really ever at all at their jobs.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So that was, it opened my eyes onto how cool of a job and rewarding this really, really is. Not that I was taking it for granted, but that just added another level of, hey man, this is super important and super fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, after your first 5K, what sparked your interest to go the triathlon route and not just the running route?
So, and through my years of bike fitting, I have found that this story is incredibly common. And it is the person losing weight. The easiest thing to do and easily the most affordable is to buy a pair of running shoes and do a 5K. You get hooked on running. And like me then, I ended up getting a stress fracture. Super bummed out. I mean, you would have thought the world was falling apart.
Yep.
And the doc's like, hey, relax, brother. Like you can still ride your bike, take a spin class. He's like, you can swim, whatever. So I was like, okay, cool. So I hopped into the spin class, super nervous. I just was like, oh, it's a bunch of yoga pants wearing, moms. Like I'm not going to fit in. I'm this awkward, still kind of semi-chubby tattooed guy. Ended up having a blast. It was awesome. Then my wife at the time, she used to be a swimmer. So I was like, I want you to teach me to swim. And I could swim like if I was at a lake.
Right.
Playing around.
Mm-hmm.
Like I wouldn't drown if I fell off a pontoon boat.
Okay.
But I couldn't swim.
Right.
So she's trying to teach me how to swim. I keep sinking. She puts me on a kickboard. I start to move backwards. So we're literally starting with her like arms underneath me, like you would train a 6-month-old to float in the water. And so it took me a couple months. I remember like the first time I nailed out like 200 meters straight and was completely gassed, but like couldn't believe I actually made 8 laps of the pool. Became a total regular in the spin classes. And it was like a month of this, just like trying to get myself ready to run, that then finally like somebody knocked on my head and was like, you do know you could do a triathlon. And there was a really popular triathlon. It lasted around like 32 years here or something, called the Wendy's International. And it was a sprint triathlon. And almost everybody in Central Ohio has the same story, that they started their first triathlon ever was the Wendy's.
Not affiliated with Wendy's fast food, right?
No, absolutely. That's who the sponsor is.
Oh, really?
Because Wendy's, the fast food restaurant's hometown is Dublin, Ohio, or basically Columbus. So yes, the irony of it is that it was Wendy's fast food was sponsoring it.
That's kind of like Little Debbie sponsoring the Ironman.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's classic. All right, sorry, I just had to ask that.
No, absolutely. It was Wendy with her red pigtails. And so, and I would say probably the adrenaline rush of finishing that race equaled the 5K. But those two are by far, like, I've never been able to equal that finish line high as I did with both those races.
And so now you're racing on your own, right? But did you have a coach of your own that you were working with once you had kind of gotten down the road a little bit further?
No. So at this point, I'm doing a bunch of reading.
Okay.
I do 4 more sprints that summer. Mm-hmm. And so I'm full on hooked. And so I think it's that fall, like early summer or late summer, early fall, I'm at the pool and I always see this chick swimming who has an Ironman swim cap on. And so, but we're never in a lane next to each other. We never get in and out of the pool together. So at some point, finally, like we're crossing paths, I say hello and I mention her, I'm starstruck by her Ironman swim cap. And so we start shooting the breeze. And so then we just start running into each other and we become friends. We're doing spin classes together. And so I sign up for 70.3 New Orleans for that spring and Ironman Louisville for that summer. And this gal, Dawn, also signs up for Ironman Louisville that summer. So as I talk to her, I find out she has a coach. and it was this online guy out of North Carolina, trymycoach.com. I
Okay.
think the place still exists. Randy something. So I email him, and I get started with a coach that January.
Okay.
So he's going to be my coach for New Orleans and for Ironman. And so it's just kind of some basic coaching coming in like on a Word document with a bunch of abbreviations. He actually had a really good system. This pamphlet that you download it's basically the book of all of his workouts, and they're all coded. So it would be like, EB1 would be an endurance bike ride 1, EB2. And so then just on your calendar schedule, it would tell you that you're doing, SS1. So you're doing the swim sprints 1, and then your bike ride that night's going to be whatever, hills 2 on the trainer or something.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. So then like literally it was like 100 pages of paper, and I went and got it 3-ring punched at Kinko's.
Yeah.
And bound in. And then the days just had all these codes on them, and you would just look up your code, and then that would be the full workout.
Not quite as easy as Training Peaks is nowadays, but for the time, that was pretty smart on his part.
Oh, that, and I start to think, I'm like, looking back at it now, I'm like, how much work did you put in to get to write up all of this and to then code it? And I have no clue.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy. But then he must have had it right in front of him to be able to put your schedule together, right? Because he has to know what all of his codes are. So it seems like it actually may have been more work for him as the coach, because he'd have to know what your schedule was and how to progress you through your training plan, and then apply the appropriate codes to your, Word document or Excel sheet that he was going to spit back to you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I look at I'm like, this guy was working hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if he uses Training Peaks nowadays. I'm sure he's probably much happier about the Training Peaks model than using the coded system.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I would hope.
And so you start working with a coach. And where does your passion from coaching start to kind of come to light?
So for whatever reason, I can't even tell you how it started, I get obsessed with bike fit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just find it very interesting. And the triathlon community seems to be blossoming big time in Columbus. But like the bike stores, and we have one local triathlon store, just seem to be like kind of phoning it in, and I don't know. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go out to Colorado, get certified with the Retool system. I'm going to open up a bike fitting studio, brought on a buddy of mine as the mechanic. There happened to be a little warehouse in the back. And I was like, man, I'll buy 12 Kurt Kinetic trainers and run indoor cycling classes. And that was pretty much the business model. And then by default, a couple people asked me to coach them. So I just started, it kind of just fell in line with the bike fitting and everything. And I found it obviously super rewarding, super interesting. And then that progressed to, with the bike fitting, the biomechanics, and learning like the corrective exercises for that stuff, and then the coaching, and then the injuries, and learning corrective exercises for that. Then I started getting more and more into strength training for triathletes and endurance athletes. So then I took my 1-hour cycle classes I would put on and turn them to 90 minutes, where you would do 60 minutes on the bike with me, and then you would do 30 minutes off the bike strength training. And that kind of just blossomed, and then you have it.
Yeah. And
I was coaching and strength training.
for a lot of the people listening who may not know, your passion, I guess we should say, is strength training. I mean, you are big on the strength training, and we're not talking about the typical Arnold bodybuilding strength training. You're talking about, and I'll put air quotes around it, and I will put a caveat that this is not your favorite word in the world, but it's more functional strength.
Yep.
And more like
Yep.
working strength in the different planes and moving across planes.
Yep. So now I kind of classify my strength training as I make people stronger, faster, and harder to kill. And that can be broken down to a simpler form of is I want all my athletes, no matter what their sport of choice is, I want them to be fit enough that the answer is always yes. Hey man, can you help me build a deck on the back of my house this weekend? Yes. Hey, you want to jump in on this charity 10K next weekend? Yes. Hey, we're all thinking about doing a work team at the Spartan race. Got any interest? Yes. I don't want any of my athletes thinking I don't have the strength or the dexterity or the stamina or the proprioception or balance to be able to do X, Y, or Z. I want them to be able to say yes. Even if their primary thing is to cycle, they should be able to go and rock climb. They should be able to do a Spartan race. They should be stronger, faster, and harder to kill.
And actually, it's funny that you mention that, and you talk about the the crossover, and if you're a cyclist, but your friend wants to go rock climbing, because Ginny and I were just talking last night, and we were talking about right now at this point in the season for a lot of us East Coasters, this is the point in time where we're in our off season, right? It's starting to get cold. The weather's starting to change. We're not doing super, super duper intense focused workouts right now. And being able to have the ability to say yes to other things will pay dividends when it comes time to getting back to triathlon training, because you are still staying active. You're not turning into or going back to being, a couch potato, but you're switching it up. And that's what Ginny and I were really talking about, last night, was having the ability to switch things up. And it could be something as simple as putting your tri-bike away, your TT bike away, and maybe getting out on your road bike and leaving the Garmin at home. But it can also be, some of the things like you just said, hey, if your buddy calls you and is like, yo, let's go rock climbing, or let's go check out this new indoor rock gym, or let's go play paintball at this place, you have the ability to go and do those things.
100%. Yeah, I think it's we've talked about the off season is so important for mental, and it is so important for physical. And the big thing you see all the time is all these injuries. Like, triathlon's so linear based and it's so repetitive. And the moment a muscle imbalance really reveals itself, because we all have them, and then you repeat that, on the bike, your cadence is supposed to be 88 to 92. So now you have a muscle imbalance activating 92 times a minute. You're supposed to run with a cadence of 180. So now you have a muscle imbalance happening, 90 or 180, however you want to do the math, every minute that you got for an hour, 60 times 90, these numbers start to add up. Mm-hmm. So to do the air quoted functional training is super important. Let alone, it's also cool to, you don't want to be that person who can qualify for Team USA age group nationals, but who then grabs the gallon of milk that's in the bag by the handles, bent over, and as you pick it up and turn, you throw your back out. Mm-hmm. And now you're like, okay, now my off season, I'm injured, or I'm in season and my race is blown because I have a pulled muscle in my back from a gallon of milk, which is completely, that happens all the time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's because you don't have any rotational core strength. It's super important. And obviously some people are much more resilient to injuries than others, but I'm like a glass jaw on a boxer. Like, I get injured by so many things that that's why I've gotten hooked on this strength training, is so I can actually still continue to train and I still get bumped out of races annually on injuries.
And so you are that guy who throws out his back picking up the newspaper, like that horror story that everyone hears, which I still don't know if it ever actually happened and if it was ever true. But the guy that leans over to pick up his newspaper in his driveway in the morning, and he just like does it with straight knees or whatever they tell you, and like stands back up and throws out his back, and it's like it's not what he was lifting, it was how he was lifting it. So like that's you are that guy.
Yeah, 100%. Oh yeah, no, the milk has happened to me.
Okay.
I mean, even my wife now, Betsy, it was like 3 years ago, off season, and she's starting to now do some strength training because it's the off season. And I think it was an 8-pound kettlebell, and she just needed to move it out of the way. So she just bent over and kind of grabbed it and went to toss it, and it torqued her back, and she had this big knot in her QL in her lower back for like a year and a half.
Whoa.
And it was like, yeah, and it totally would screw with her on bike rides and stuff. And it's just like those silly things. I try to help prevent that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you started coaching, did you ever have the vision of opening up this massive training facility, or were you content with coaching your athletes that you're coaching, which I'm sure some of them are remote and some of them are local, and then training these local athletes out of your garage?
So it's funny. So Triformis was the name of the store. And so we ended up bringing in bikes and more retail. And literally my partner, Bill, did everything with the bikes and managed all the retail. And I did literally everything with the bike fit and the coaching and the fitness. And so just those conversations of how are we going to grow? My opinion was on my end. His opinion was on his end. Mm-hmm. And finally, we kind of just looked at each other and we're like, this is really two businesses. Our lease is up in 2 months. Like, why don't you just open up a bike store and run it exactly the way you want? I'll do bike fitting and fitness exactly the way I want. And now we're both 100% happy. Mm-hmm. So it worked out perfect. So we ended up accidentally building two businesses, and he opened up a little bike store on the other side of town, cyclical nature that is booming, does great, and it's perfect. It's just a little kind of local mom and pop type of vibe. And then I ultimately was coaching mostly online and then moved my gym into my garage for the last 4 years. So I've kind of had a cushy life. Mm-hmm. And I had thought about a gym. I had crunched numbers all the time. And at one point finally, and I had a bunch of ideas about, how I would organize my gym, make it different, et cetera. And even at one point, I got one of my clients who's a really smart guy, manager for a hedge fund, and he analyzes businesses for a living.
Okay.
I'm like, hey, I've got a rough business plan. Let me shoot it to you. Will you review it? Let's get coffee. And so he's like, this is a pretty solid business plan. I'm like, oh, cool, thanks. I'm like, but I don't get it. What's wrong? I was like, because the profit here sucks. And he laughed. He's like, dude, your business plan's spot on. He's like, gyms go out of business all the time. Like, this is exactly, you're right. And so, hence, I guess my point was I had an idea that I would want to, but I was doing good enough as a coach and with the people in the garage that I just was like in no real rush, kind of waiting for opportunity to fall into my lap. And I stumbled across self-made training facility out of Southern California on Instagram randomly. Went online, just checking it out, saw it had a franchise button. I was like, clicked the franchise button, sent an email. The CEO and founder, Miguel, called me like 20 minutes later. We had a good conversation. So I went to one of my clients who is a business consultant. I said, what do you think? He's like, I think we go to California and we're literally on the plane. I'm like, so what's the play here? He's like, well, you play good cop, you know the fitness industry. He's I'll play get bad cop, try to cut through the salesman bullshit and see what the truth is. And he was like, I say, we find 10 things that are wrong with this business plan. Maybe we find 3 cool things that we, quote unquote, liberate. And maybe we open up our own gym and we got a couple good pointers. And then we'll go to Mammoth and ski Mammoth for 3 days. We're like, cool. So we end up spending 3 days with Miguel, only 1 day at Mammoth. We did not find 10 reasons to not do this. We found one big reason to do it. And now we have Self-Made Training Facility Columbus open for business as of this week.
And so actually it's, you mentioned this in the beginning and you kind of just, passed over it, but I do want to ask about it a little bit more because you are the second facility of this style that I've heard of. There is another one out this way, and I also had the guy who owns this gym on my podcast, and it's called OPEX, and they have a few different facilities, but it's the same concept. So at least from kind of what I've gathered, they have all personal training, and it's not like your big box gym. It's not like Retro Fitness. It's not like you pay a membership and then, you can show up whenever you want and just go through and do whatever exercises you want. It's more centered around, athletes like you were talking about, and personal training specific to, what these people are doing. So
correct.
That's what you are what you guys are doing.
Correct.
And
yep.
And so can you talk to me a little bit about like the differences between that and the big box gym, just in relation to, some of those numbers that you were talking about? Because I am thinking that the profit margins and the things that you were seeing, that was for something more like a big box gym versus, what you are doing right now.
So, like the gyms I was looking at would be more kind of like independent meets CrossFit-y. You get your memberships for $100 to $150 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And you just had to have an exorbitant amount of members. And, the more coaches you had, that was more the profit. And you're looking at, 30 grand, 40 grand profit. Like mm-hmm. That's not meaning, and I'm taking a salary and then that's profit. Like I'm the owner. I don't take a salary. Pardon me. I make money coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And then I make 30 or 40 grand on it. And it's like, man, you're going to work your tail off for, 50 grand.
Yeah.
Like really work your tail off for 50 grand. If you get the 150 clients,
right.
You got to get these members and keep them happy.
Well, and that goes into like a whole nother situation that we don't have to dive into, but then that gets into having one coach, with 30 people in a class and people not doing movements correctly. And, like now we're talking like your big box YMCA body pump where people are doing squats and curls with god awful form and like, go ahead. But that's a whole nother,
100%.
Like that's a whole nother thing that just blows my mind.
Well, that's where CrossFit started to get a bad name, and I actually ended up going and getting a CrossFit certification after it started getting a bad name. And they addressed this heavily in the coaches seminar. And so, CrossFit kind of fell into a problem of it became so popular, so quick that there weren't enough coaches for gyms to hire, or so many gyms would pop up all at once in a close area that there weren't enough members to let the owners afford to have enough coaches, that then you get this intense and complicated athletic system. And instead of a coach to every 6 or 8 people, you have a coach to 1 out of every 30.
Mm-hmm.
And that's then where, for a couple years, you were hearing like just these horror stories, people getting rhabdo and blowing out their backs and their knees and, dislocating shoulders. And it's like all these middle-aged people trying to get after it without any prep. And so that problem happened. But So the self-made is, for us, notoriously the personal training business kind of has a ceiling on it of like 25 to 35 grand a year.
Mm-hmm.
And now online coaching has opened that up big time, but a lot of people don't know how to do online coaching or what platforms to do online coaching. I think like we're definitely ahead of the curve as far as being triathlon coaches and with Training Peaks.
Yeah.
That I think we just got lucky. Like technology made that transition and the industry made that transition for us, that then you just became a coach and you just kind of knew that what Training Peaks was, and it was easy to use, and that's how you coach people. But a lot of these trainers don't know about online coaching. But the big problem is that they're not taught. Like a standard big box gym, I guess, is this. They're going to charge $70 to $80 an hour for a client to get personal trained.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're going to pay that personal trainer somewhere between 15 to 30% of that.
Right.
And it usually always starts at 15. And then they say, well, you got to get your sales up, and then you got to sell enough after products and more of this, and then we'll bump you up to 20% commission. And so, they're billing at 70 to 80 an hour, but they're netting 10, 12, 15 an hour. And they're working their tails off. And then you start even getting into some of the better gyms, and it's still a 50-50 cut. And all they're doing is kind of feeding them some clients here and there. So the trainer doesn't really get a chance to understand like what it is to acquire a client. They also don't get tutored in like how to be a coach, like being attentive, those social skills. Lots of times just people who like to work out, and not everybody personality is the same. Like people need taught how to teach. And so they don't even get that. And that's why you hear these horror stories of like, oh, all my trainer did was like just stare at the phone and, count my reps. And I just felt like he was going through the motions. And it's like, well, that's the environment that the big box gyms are almost promoting.
Right.
Where this is, we literally are looking for those individuals whose passion, somebody like you and I, whose passion is to coach and to help people. And if they're willing to work hard and they have that entrepreneurial spirit, we give them an entire system and tools to where the ceiling comes off, and that they legitimately, with hard work and following the system, can make a high 5-figure income, if not tap into a low 6-figure. And if they can really excel at it, if it really kind of fits their personality and their desire and drive, the sky's the limit with online coaching.
That's awesome. Yeah, no,
but it also, it takes a mindset though. Like as I've recruited trainers now, like I can see them when I say, rent, $650 a month. And they're like, where the hell am I coming up with $650 a month? And my retort is, so you're not making $650 a month?
Right.
And so, then I reverse engineer it for them at $75 an hour, but their brain can't comprehend it. And they're still like, well, where are you getting 75 an hour? I make 12 an hour. And how could I ever charge this client 50? And I'm like, well, no, they're paying 75.
Yeah.
So they'd be glad to pay you 50.
Right.
And you get to keep all of it.
Right.
And you can just see the wheels aren't turning right. Just kind of how people talk about like, in high school, there should be like general business classes or personal finance classes, like real world stuff.
Yeah.
You can see this. There's just, and brains are different. Like it's nothing against them. But I can just in 10 to 15 minutes, if somebody gets obsessed with rent, I don't try to sell them on self-made. I try to politely give them all the information and let them walk out, because I know that person is not, that person's brain doesn't operate like this.
Right.
Kind of like the difference between an engineer and an artist.
Yes, absolutely.
An artist can't convince an engineer this is the way to think. He just can't physically do it.
Right.
And vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
The engineer is looking at the artist going, there's paint stains on your shirt. My ties are lined up in order according to color, tone, and size.
Yeah.
It's two different. Yeah. So So we need the trainers who are not just passionate, but also have that entrepreneurial go-getter spirit. And when you get that, then we've got somebody who's going to succeed at our gym.
Well, and I'm sure it's got to be hard for you. You can't force that on somebody because it wasn't forced on you. Like you just have it. You have it, and you have had it, since that tattoo shop closed, and you were like, all right, well, fuck it. Like, let's go. We're going to start a tattoo shop. And you just went for it. Like I don't know. I mean, there's always that argument that, oh, is entrepreneurship, learned or,
right.
Can you, or are you just born with it? And it's that nature versus nurture. And I don't know. I'm kind of back and forth on it, but it seems like people either have it or they don't. And I mean, I feel like it's like that with coaching too, to an extent. Like you either have it or you don't. And there's good coaches out there and there's coaches that are not as good. And it seems like you can teach the fundamentals, but putting your spin on it, and how you interact with people and your athletes, I think it's huge, and that interaction cannot be taught.
100%. I mean, I think we can all relate, whether you remember their name or not, but there was through the 12 years of school, or maybe it didn't happen till college. Like we all have that one or two teachers that we just remember, like, man, like I got an A+ in that class. Like I was hitting on all cylinders. Like things were clicking. Like that teacher was just that fucking good. Yeah. And there's a reason why those are rare too. But yeah, you either got it or you don't. So we're looking for people who at least think they got it, and then we're going to give them every opportunity to succeed, which is cool. So now I get to actually coach, technically coaches. So this is like a whole different sort of coaching, is teaching all these, most of them are younger cats. Got a couple people in my age group as well. How to like take it to the next level, like how to help more people and how to just get paid the value that you're giving. That was like Miguel and Autumn have unique stories, too long for this podcast, but ultimately fitness on an end saved both their lives. And I think fitness on some end has saved almost everybody's life if you're into fitness, especially if you came from an overweight. Like I probably, I wasn't on the verge of dying, but had I continued down that path, 210 becomes 250, becomes 280, becomes diabetes type 2, or, some cardiac issues or whatever it may be. But kind of his point was they really wanted to figure out how to turn this into a viable business for the business owners and for the trainers, because he was like, nothing would be worse. He's like, and what happens, that you have a great coach whose desire is to truly, truly help people and has to wind up giving it up because they can't live off 30 grand. So they grab a job that they're potentially not as happy with. But think of all the people who missed out on getting coached by that person simply because they couldn't make a good enough living doing what they're super passionate about. That he's like, I want to give those people the opportunity to be like, no, I get to be a coach for life. And think of all the people they're going to positively impact now throughout their life instead of having to give up their dream. And I was like, man, that's like, I know we're getting super deep on coaching, but it can be that deep on some instances.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's super important too. Like if, I understand that there are some people out there that having a triathlon coach is not for everyone. And, even still to this day, like when I say something about like, oh yeah, my coach, and people are like, wait, you have a coach? I'm like, yeah, I have a coach. And they're like, yep. They're like, wait, so, and 9 times out of 10, it's people who are not in the sport, but like, they just don't get it. They're like, so what, you pay him? I'm like, yeah, I pay him. I pay him every month, and he delivers my workouts for me. And, that's why I've qualified for nationals. And that's why, like, I've had some of the accomplishments that I've had because I have a coach and he tailors my, my plan for me. I think that the most important thing about, having a coach and finding a coach is as the athlete, you have to do the interview process and you have to interview the coaches and you have to find that right fit for you because, I'm not the right coach for everyone. And I would venture to say you probably feel the same exact way, is that
100%.
your personality is not going to line up with everybody. So, I think just to kind of like close that off with the coaching thing is that, if you are considering a coach and, you think that you could benefit from coaching, do your due diligence and interview coaches and talk with other people who have worked with them and, find out a little bit about them before you just jump in and start emptying your pockets, because some of these people out there charge a crazy amount of money. And that's your hard-earned money. That's all I want to say about that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, I mean, I know I'm not the right coach for everybody. And I mean, I always tell that, like, hey, there's always room for conversation, and within a month, whatever, like, I'm a big boy. You won't hurt my feelings. Like, we can still go out and have a beer and ride bikes together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I do want to just ask you like 2 more questions, because I know I'm like taking a ton of your time, but
no, dude, it's all good.
Really enjoying our conversation. So I
me too.
Lost track of the time. So I do apologize for that. But I did want to ask you this question, and I thought about it earlier when you were talking about the, your obsession with bike fitting and, dialing people in on their bikes. And I wanted to know if you think that, the wanting to perfect that came from your tattoo days and came from, maybe the mechanics, because I know the tattoo guns are very mechanical and you have to maintain them. Or, also from the tattoo days, you want your tattoo, when you are tattooing someone, you want that to be perfect because it's something that's obviously going to last forever. So do you think that, your level of obsession came from your tattoo days and you learned it and perfected it through that?
So that might be the coolest question anybody's ever asked me, which tells you I've never heard it before, which tells you I've never thought about it before. But in all reality, I mean, now that you say that, there must be, I guess, kind of going on in the vein of what we were just talking about, like you either got it or you don't. There must be something that triggers me on like some of this minutia, because it happens in kitchens, for fine dining, plate presentation, and doing all these little tiny dices that are supposed to be perfect too. Exactly. Tattooing. I did pinstriping on cars, which is like super exact, and got insanely obsessed with pinstriping and like pulling the perfect lines that, if I had to guess, whatever triggered all that was probably the exact same thing that triggered my obsession with bike fitting. So I think you're onto something.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the last question that I want to ask you, and you've seen a lot of different things and you've had a lot of different experiences, and there's definitely, I'm sure you've had so many experiences where you've had to make the decision to, go or not go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, especially as someone who comes from the background of looking at a picture and saying, I don't like that person, I need to change it, this is what I'm going to do. What do you have to say to the person who is reviewing those pictures right now, right? They're looking at the pictures, they don't like the person in the mirror, or they're at this dead-end job that they hate, but they have this side passion that they've always been working on, a little bit here and there. What do you say to that person that they haven't made that first step yet, but like it's time. They're almost at their breaking point, and like you got it. Now's the time you got to jump. Like, what do you say to them to get them to go for it?
I mean, ultimately, I look at it as, so for everybody, don't ever mistake, like, even some of these like super, super successful guys who are entrepreneurs, like, don't ever mistake that it came easy Lots of times you don't hear the full story behind it. Yes, maybe was there a little luck, but in all reality, it was a lot of 90 and 100-hour work weeks. But if you're willing to put in the work, like if you truly love something, I always tell myself, because trust me, I get pits in my stomach every fucking day. Like there are fires that happen and the line of emotions that happens to anybody in my position, we're all the same. Like there's moments where you're like, man, I fucked up. This is the dumbest thing ever. I wish I just worked at like a desk job. But so don't be afraid of those feelings happening. They're going to happen. They happen to everybody. But I always think, what's the worst that could happen? Like, what's really the worst that could happen? Like, okay, so I go broke. But how many like immigrants try to smuggle themselves in here, get in a raft on a boat to try to like wash ashore in Miami with no money because this is the land of opportunity? How many stores do you go in where there's, obviously a pretty fresh or new to America immigrant running the store, doesn't really speak English that well, the whole 9 yards, and they're opening up whatever this store, like they came over with nothing. So I always try to think about like, we're in the best era ever with technology. The power of Instagram is insane. You live in America, which regardless of politics, the land of opportunity couldn't be more robust here than anywhere else. What's the worst that could happen? Go broke? Got to start again? That's a pretty first world problem, starting again in America. I know it's vast, but that's literally what I just tell myself. Like, okay, I'll go for it. I'm going to work my ass off. If I lose everything, I got plenty of time to make it again.
For sure. I can dig that, man. I can dig that. Well, like I said, I know that I stole way more of your time than
dude, this was awesome.
What like initially, everyone always says like, oh, hey, how much time do you usually need? And I'm like, well, usually an hour, but like if we start having a great conversation, I don't want to just like cut it off. So
yeah, well, that's why I didn't ask you how long this went. I was like, I don't even want to know. I don't care. Like, let's just sit down and have a good. I had a good feeling this was going to be a good podcast. So yeah, I didn't even care. So this is perfect.
Yeah, no, well, I appreciate that, very much, and I look forward to definitely catching up with you again.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Absolutely.
Cool. All right, my friends, that is my interview with Wes, Coach Wes. Wes, No Limits, Hammer Harder. What did you think? Do me a favor, shoot a little message, a little comment over Wes's way, and let him know what you thought about the podcast. I'm sure that he would dig hearing from some of the Do It For Yourself followers and listeners, just to let him know that, his story was heard here, and you appreciate it. Let him know what you found, motivational or inspirational, from his particular journey and how he is doing it for himself. I would like to just say thank you to you guys, the supporters of this show. I really do appreciate everything that you guys are doing. I appreciate the reviews that you're leaving over on iTunes, the ratings, and everything that you're doing to help out the show. It really means a lot to me. So thank you very much for doing that. And I look forward to bringing you another amazing interview for next week's podcast.